Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Carrie Brazel. I'm with the Office of Emergency Management, along with my colleagues with the Seattle Fire Department. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a few minutes, leaving some time for folks to arrive. So to get prepared for tonight, we want to make sure that if you would like to turn on live captions and subtitles, please select the CC button in your video controls. To change the caption language, select Settings, the gear icon, Captions and Subtitles, and choose the language that you want. We'll use the Q&A function tonight to input questions. We will either provide a private reply, or if relevant to the whole group, we will hold until the end and our presenter will respond to the question. Please feel free to input any questions you have throughout the presentation. We will be recording this session and we'll post it to our YouTube channel by early next week with captioning. If you registered for this session via our events calendar and provided an email, or email when signing into the Teams meeting, we will email out the slides and the link to the recording next week. Please do register for future webinars in this series by going to the Office of Emergency Management event calendar at seattle.gov/emergency. Thanks so much for your patience. Really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to hand it over to Captain Andy Collins with the Seattle Fire Department. He is our Emergency Preparedness Officer. Take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Carrie. It is a pleasure to be here tonight to share with you the Seattle Fire Department's plans in the event of an earthquake, or for that matter, any large-scale disaster response. Seattle Fire Department is a lead agency in these type of events, and our scope encompasses both firefighting, search and rescue, and hazmat responses. My name is Andy Collins. I am a member of the Seattle Fire Department. I'm currently the captain of emergency preparedness, which means that this falls squarely in my lane. I oversee all of our disaster planning, any of our outside coordination with other agencies, as well as navigating grant processes and so forth. So some of the capabilities unique to this city come through this office. So tonight, these are the things I'd like to go over. I want to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain of City of Seattle Fire Department's planning. We have lots of plans, and we are prepared. Now, I will say, full disclosure, the type of incident that we're talking about tonight is going to be unique, and our best laid plans may take a little bit of creativity, but have confidence. The plan that I share with you tonight is an all hazard, all encompassing, but we're going to go through that. So we'll start out. I'll give you just some overview of the department, some of the unique capabilities we have here in Seattle. We're going to talk about the different, our disaster management plan and what that looks like, the different levels of that. I'm going to give you some details on what our initial response actions are. You may not see us immediately, and some of tonight is intended to set that expectation for you as a community to know that at the onset of a big event like this, we are going to be consumed with wrapping our arms around this. But I'm going to let you know what we are doing immediately following an earthquake. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like when our resources are depleted, but we still need help. And where do we turn? Who's coming to help us? And then at the end, we will close with just touching on some ideas for you as the public to be prepared, because that really is going to be key in a successful response. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I do encourage you to put your questions in the chat. If there's things at the end that I can answer, I would love to answer your questions. So let's get started. So out of the gate, Seattle Fire Department, you can see what our vision is, but we want to be a national leader in both responding to and preventing these type of emergencies. And one thing I want you to take away from this as you read the mission statement is that second sentence: we respond immediately when any member of our community needs help. And that is the expectation that we set with you. We want you to have that expectation. But just a moment ago, I talked about managing expectations. And when we find ourselves in a large magnitude earthquake or so forth, we may not be able to respond immediately like you are accustomed to. And we just want you to know that. So this is the lens that we conduct ourselves, our business through, and you can watch that through this presentation. All right, Seattle Fire Department, this is who we are. We roughly have just over 1,000 uniformed members. Of that, there's 4 different platoons. We run a 24-hour cycle or platoon shift, which means that we have members on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are available all the time to field your emergency calls through the 911 center. Of that 1,000 members, we are supported through, you can see the breakdown of our chiefs, our firefighters, firefighter EMTs, as well as our paramedics. And we could not do this without our civilian support staff, of which there are approximately 100. We talked about our rotating shift cycle. That's A, B, C, and D. So there is a method to our work shifts, but basically that dices into 200 to 250 members on call every day in the city. We operate out of 33 stations geographically located, as you can see in the map right there. We have 6 battalions, but as many of you may know, Battalion 3 is actually the administrative headquarters for our Medic 1 program. So for all intents and purposes tonight, I'll be referring to 5 battalions, and that you can remember this map, because as we get into what we call decentralized operations, this is how it's going to break down into those 5 operating battalions. I mentioned our 911 call center. That's the fire alarm center, staffed 24 hours a day with uniformed members. You can know that whoever's answering the phone on the other end of your 911 call is a seasoned member of the Seattle Fire Department. They have responded to 911 calls before, emergencies. They've been assigned to engines and trucks. So they have just institutional knowledge and context of what your needs may entail and how to best address those. We have our own training division down in Southwest Seattle. That's where we conduct both in-house training, but also train our own firefighters. We run our own recruit schools, our own recruit classes down there. And then a big part of what we do is fire prevention. For us, if there is no fire, if we can minimize the number of emergencies, that's a win. And so that is the fire prevention division. Encompasses the fire inspections that we do for buildings, maintaining life safety systems, that's sprinkler systems, fire alarms. So a big part of what we do, but not always in the forefront. And then our services division, that is where we are able to provide all the logistics that are required both for day-to-day operations, but then in these large-scale incidents, that's where the cache of equipment is going to be drawn from when we need to surge operations and get more equipment, more materials, procure equipment and so forth to address the needs. So this is what our rolling stock looks like. Out of those 33 stations, we operate 32 engines. You can see a dozen ladder trucks, a handful of aid units and medic units. We have some unique units as well. Many of you on this call are probably familiar with Seattle's Health One system, a system that's pioneered here in the Northwest to really address the needs of individuals that may not need a trip to the ER. Instead, they may need to get connected with a social worker or a resource in the community. So we operate the Health One unit. We also have 2 air units, and in those we will talk about it in an instant I'll go into, but that allows us to on scene replenish our supply of air. We've got some hose wagons. Again, I will give you an example in a moment on how these would come into play in a large scale incident. And then we also have a fleet of fireboats. Seattle Fire Department is not only land-based, but we also respond throughout the Puget Sound and in the region. So I'm going to go through a few set of slides that explain some of these special units because I think it's really important for you. This is your Seattle Fire Department, and I want to explain to you some of the unique resources that we have here in the city that are also not only available to us, but as a regional asset as well. So quickly, we'll run through these. Our Rescue 1 unit, these members operate out of Station 14 in the Soto area, and they are amazing. This is a team of people that are highly trained in heavy rescue, operating in trench environments, dive, rope rescue. It's also our dive team. But these individuals are going to be the ones that are called upon on a day-to-day basis to respond to the type of needs that we might see across the city during an earthquake. Structural collapse. They bring the tools, the lifting, the breaching, the breaking tools to access patients and mitigate the situation. Our hazmat team down here in Pioneer Square, this is quite a robust capability. Many departments will have a hazmat team, but few will have the level of equipment and the capabilities that you have here in Seattle. Seaburn detection, enhanced radiation, they're able to partner with law enforcement for drug analysis in some of their scenes and so forth. And there's a constant relationship that is intact with some of those agencies you see there, the FBI, Department of Health, the 10th CST, the Civil Support Team down at Camp Murray. So you trust me, you're in good hands with Seattle Fire's hazmat team. A dedicated decon team is here in Seattle. This is for I will say you, but the citizens. In the event there's an exposure, we're not just going to knock it off with a fire hose. We're going to run you through this, what we call technical decon, and this is where we are able to thoroughly decon you as a patient, us as responders, and so forth, so that you come out the other side of this clean and able to be sent on for further care. All right, I mentioned our fireboats, but this is really a capability that is an extension of our land-based response into the Puget Sound. You can see some of the capabilities there, but they're used not only for fire suppression, but for search and rescue out on the open water. The fireboats here in Elliott Bay would serve in the event of a large-scale earthquake, where possibly the infrastructure below ground, the water that's pumping to the fire hydrants may be compromised. We've got the ability to use these as a manifold, basically, and pull water out of the Puget Sound, coupled with those hose wagons we just talked about that have approximately a mile worth of hose on them each, and run that water from that water source up into the inland, upwards of a mile or so, in order to get a water supply for fire suppression. This topic was really enhanced recently. We partnered with the Princeton University and University of Buffalo, New York. They did a very detailed study of a portion of downtown Seattle, and they looked at, following a large-scale earthquake like we're talking about, what kind of fires might we expect to see that would ignite after the shaking stops. And after running through many models, they noted that we need to be prepared to put out fires with a compromised water supply system down in the Pioneer Square or the downtown core. So coupling our fireboats with those hose wagons we talked about, that's part of our response plan. Rescue swimmers, they are dispersed throughout the community. This is an open water resource for lakes, for the Puget Sound as well. Surface diving down to 20 feet to make a rapid save of somebody before they drown. The Marine and Tunnel team is a unique team, and this is a team that is equipped and trained to facilitate firefighting on board vessels, large ships. We have a tremendous amount of traffic, maritime traffic that comes through the Port of Seattle, and often we are called upon to help mitigate situations there. And I threw this one in because I would challenge you to find any other department that has one of these. This is our mobile ventilation unit, and I bring this because I really feel like it emphasizes the fact that we're unique in Seattle. We have a MVU, as we call it, that can change the environment of the incident. And now that may be in a firefight, that might be pressurizing a stairwell in a high rise in order to create a safe space for members to descend the stairwell and not be in the smoke. That might be pumping fresh air into a tunnel environment or a collapsed structure, as well as in a hazmat. We can actually move a cloud in a direction to create a safe space for us to operate in and for the public to be safe. Our vault team, many of you may know, is just a tremendous successful partnership with City Light. This was born out of some incidents that highlighted that water is not the most effective means of mitigating fire, and especially here in Seattle, with we have such a large tech industry. Increased damage or delays due to fire can have a catastrophic event or effect on tech business. So in summary, this team is partnering with City Light to be equipped with the proper tools, the CO2 to put those type of fires out and do it safely, both for the public as well as our members. So they're on call 24 hours a day. Our communications team, we've talked about the fact that we have a 24/7 911 dispatch center, but that's not it. We have a robust cache of radios, equipments that we can push out into rural areas. We can set up a communications network here in Seattle if ours were to go down. But we don't just have equipment, we have trained communication leaders and communication technicians that are able to operate those. And I can tell you that this gets used regularly. We've already had our first deployment to the wildland firefighting scene of a COM-T with equipment in order to support those efforts in the wildland arena. And then lastly, I would just highlight that we have, while we don't have our own aviation platforms, we do have members that are trained and equipped to operate in and around aircraft. As you can see in some of these photos, we have folks that can communicate with the aircraft from the ground, and this is going to be important because in the event of an earthquake where the road structure may be out or compromised, we may be looking for airlift, some sort of rotary wing to come in to resupply or help extract people. But our members are ready to set up landing zones or pickup zones, ride the hoist if they need to. And this team was deployed to the Oso landslide several years ago and did just that. So they're trained and ready. All right, now that you have a snapshot of kind of who we are and some of the capabilities we bring, I want to shift into the next topic of disaster management. So our disaster management which we refer to as the Orange Book, is really a body of policies and administrative decisions and operational activities that are in place to both prepare, respond to, and then recover from natural or man-made disasters. So this Orange Book comes in 4 versions, and it's tailored to field versions. So we have one on every apparatus. We have a station version in every fire station. Each battalion headquarters has a version that applies to operations at their level. And then the Resource Management Center, or what we call the RMC, many other departments call this their Department Operations Center, their DOC, also has a copy. So that's, and this set of guidelines is really in place to guide operational direction in the field. This lets our members have a framework to not just guess, but to know what to be doing when this happens. It also gives guidance to our Fire Alarm Center on what protocols need to be put in place. And then at the the RMC or the EOC, it shares our plan of what other departments can expect. Oh, just a moment. What I want to do is, there we go. I think it's important for you to know how we operate. The Seattle Fire Department, for really transparently, is always at a level 5, and so level 5 is the first implementation level of this disaster management plan, and that's really day-to-day operations. That's what we talked about at the beginning of this. Your level of expectation is that you call 911 and we respond, and we are responding to hundreds of calls every single day, and we're able to manage that with the resources that we have. This structure that we have, descending from 5 down to level 1, really is built in progression of logistical support and coordination needs in order to maintain capabilities in the city. And it's also, like I mentioned a minute ago, this is built on an all hazard approach. But I will tell you that these 5 levels are not corresponding to what some of you may be familiar with in our levels of alarms, and we'll talk about those. So level 5, day-to-day ops. Level 4 is, well, actually, before I leave that, the only change, maybe shift from day-to-day ops would be in level 5. We may stand up our Resource Management Center, staff it with command and staff personnel during level 5 when we have pre-planned events, and that might be something like Seafair. So this is something that we've developed an event action plan. We've got a detailed plan for. We know that it's going to require some additional logistics and so forth, but it's an isolated incident that's happening parallel with daily ops. So as we leave level 4, or excuse me, level 5, we move into level 4. This is where the department's going to have really minor impacts to the citywide coverage, and that's due to events such as, say, New Year's Eve, 4th of July, where we anticipate multiple calls. This is taxing the 911 system and our resources to a degree, not broken, but just taxing it. And this is also during, say, 2 and 3 alarm fire situations where we've deployed resources simultaneously operating throughout the city, and we're beginning to be depleted. So we've got multiple separate incidents that are ongoing. The control phase, what we would call for an incident like this, is still in one operational period. So we're not necessarily doing callbacks yet. We may for certain individuals or certain units, but it's really still isolated to one period of time, and that's a 24-hour shift. In level 4, if depending on how taxed we are, the Fire Alarm Center may choose to reduce automatic fire alarm responses, or what we call AFAs, to a single unit. Typically, that's going to get would get a truck, 2 engines, and a battalion chief. But just for resource management, we may go down to a single unit. Aid units are typically going to be left off of fire responses in order to create more coverage for EMS runs. And we'll be evaluating if there are any callback needs. Now, as we descend into level 3, this is where citywide coverage and our response capacity is what I would call severely limited. This is going to be 4 and/or 5 alarm fire. We've thrown a lot of resources at this, and the pool is shallow to pull from at this point. It's going to have citywide impacts. And these are incidents such as like a citywide snowstorm, citywide windstorm or a power outage, as well as possibly an earthquake. Now an earthquake, as we all know on this call, can range in magnitude and severity, but this is where we're starting to see, hey, the ground's been shaken. We may find ourselves pushing out resources into this level 3. Fire responses may be reduced in size, and we have code red and code yellow responses based on dispatch's categorization of the severity, and we may have to triage that and make code yellow responses discretionary at the FAC's level. So this is where we're starting to get into that expectation management. Just know that as there's less of us to go around, we have to make these tough decisions. The Resource Management Center is very likely staffed at this point. It will be staffed with command and staff, and we may be looking at extending our response into the next shift. So this is, for those of you familiar with an incident action plan, this is where we start documenting and building that plan, because we expect whatever's happening to carry on for multiple work periods, and there needs to be continuity and documentation and handoff of the plan. We would also, in a level 3, expect for the EOC to be activating, which means we would be represented there as well. Okay, so level 2, as things continue to get worse, this is catastrophic. This is something like a severe earthquake, possibly a pandemic. Although I will tell you, we did not go to a level 2 in the COVID response. But this is where most calls are only going to get 1 unit, and that's really to spread the resources. But it gives the FAC discretion over where the best use of dispatched units is. We're going to be looking to mutual aid at this point. Now, one thing to keep in mind for us and for you is that as we are experiencing a catastrophic event in Seattle, it's very likely that that's a regional event. And so many of our mutual aid partners, be it Bellevue or Shoreline or Tukwila, are likely dealing with similar situations themselves. So mutual aid in and of itself is not, the cavalry isn't necessarily coming right away. This is the first plug I'm going to make for community preparedness, for preparedness on your end, because when we get into this level, the biggest force multiplier that you can be is being self-sustained and self-sufficient through your preparation and your planning. We talked about some mutual aid, and we'll go into detail a little bit more in a second, but that can come from a tiered response. And so that could be local mutual aid, that could be state, or that could even go out as far as federal. And we could be, we would likely be looking to call back resources at this point to upstaff, and the fire department ourselves are going to be in a position where we are expecting to be on our own, even at the fire stations, for 24 to 72 hours, if not longer, on our own. So we just like I'm asking you, are going to need to be self-sustained ourselves. Now, the only difference really between level 2 and level 1 is that same conditions. It's just that the fire alarm center is not operational. Now, maybe that's because they've experienced damage. Maybe the towers are out or something is precluding them, or whatever the reason, we've lost communications. Now, any day-to-day operations is like up in level 5, run through the fire alarm center. That's our central point of dispatching. They speak with the authority of the fire chief, and they're the ones that make the calls. In level 1, when they are not in the picture, we break off and start to execute decentralized operations and decentralized dispatching. And that's, recall back to the map that I showed you at the beginning, that's where our 5 battalions in essence, become their own geographic fire departments, and the battalion chief in that battalion is managing the units and the resources independently. Although, as we will talk about, that information will continue to flow to a central point to create common operating picture at both the department-wide and citywide level. Couple notes. Level 3, 2, and 1. These are certain response assets. They may not be available. That includes our limited quantities of battalion chiefs, our limited quantities of aid and medic units, those technical teams that I briefed you on here at the beginning of this. Rescue 1, there's not going to be enough of them to go around. So we are operating with the basic 4-person fire engine or ladder truck out there to make and make decisions and respond on their own. And then just to give you kind of the mindset that we are in at this point at the fire department, the highest priority as we get into level 2 and level 1 is really going to be immediate life safety actions, and as well as defensive operations in order to just contain and keep whatever's happening from getting worse. Whether that's a fire, it may not be an offensive attack. This is just how do we stop the damage and begin to get our arms around it. Okay, so what I want to do is to walk you through a scenario of what we would be doing at the fire department level during an earthquake. We drill on this every year. In the fall, we run a citywide earthquake drill. So this is something we take very seriously, and we're constantly refining our plans. But I'm going to walk you through this slide. This really speaks to the communications. So the slide that you're looking at right now, you can see the stakeholders in this scheme. You see the FAC, and D1 up there is Deputy 1. So that represents kind of higher headquarters. And then you've got the 5 different battalions. You see 6 battalions on there with Battalion 3. But the 5 geographic battalions with their subsequent stations down below. And we're just going to use Battalion 2 as an example. So the first thing we do is there's communication between the FAC and Deputy 1, identifying, is the FAC operational? Are we in a level 1 or are we in level 2? And that's going to dictate what happens next. We train for level 1. Immediately, our members know, because they have those orange books we talked about with checklists, they're going to be doing a self-assessment of their own stations. Is there damage to the station? Can we get the apparatus doors open to get the apparatus out to respond? And that's actually one of the things to do, is immediately pull them out so that we don't have to worry about having them trapped inside. What's the state of our personnel? Is anyone injured? So we are taking inventory on what our capabilities and the status of our people are. Once we get that, at the station level, that battalion chief is making calls to each station to get an update, so that he or she has a firm understanding of what capabilities exist in their own battalion. Now, I'll just remind you, we're just using Battalion 2, but this is happening simultaneously throughout all 5 battalions in the city. Okay, once that foundation's been done, each station is going to go out and conduct a route recon, or many people here, the damage assessment or the windshield surveys. This is the plan that the fire department will execute, but this plan is nested in the city's plans. Because of our location throughout the city and the apparatus that we have, the members that we have, we are the initial eyes of the city, of the EOC, of the mayor, to just assess how bad the damage is and where the focal points are. So they go out, they complete these, and as they're going, they're taking note. The officer on each of those apparatus is taking note of what they're seeing and documenting that, and they're categorizing it, and they are pushing, or actually sending that information to the battalion chiefs, so that in one central point, they're getting an assessment of the whole city. So once that happens, the battalion chiefs collect all of that information, prioritize it amongst their battalion, And then they begin to push that information to the RMC, so that our RMC now sees citywide what our firefighters on the ground are seeing. And then they are able to push resources internally as needed to begin mitigating. And then the RMC will, on that communication cycle, push the information to the EOC. That was an overview of what happens at the battalion level, or the just overview of the whole thing. Company operations, we'll just quickly go through this. We spoke a little bit about this, but I want you to pay attention to the graphic here. I'll go ahead and build the slide. Each response district for each fire station has a earthquake route, and this earthquake route is designed intentionally to let the units drive in one continuous swoop and put eyes on key infrastructure, key locations that are places of high life safety, possibly a hospital, a large location where folks may be working. Now, some of this may depend on the day and of the week and the time of day that this happens, but a school, for instance, a place of worship. These are places we want to know. We anticipate seeing if there's damage, the most hazard and the most lives may be at stake. So this is a pictorial representation of what that route looks like. This is just quickly what that documentation looks like. So that person, that officer in the front seat, is filling this out and giving it a number so that it's in the event. And I need to pause here for a second and again really just address expectation management during the earthquake route that you're looking at. You very well may see a fire apparatus drive by your incident. Now we go back to the mission statement we started with, and that is a stark deviation from what you're used to seeing the Seattle Fire Department. We come to you whenever you need help. In an incident like this, we may drive by because it is critical for us to get a comprehensive view of the entire city so that we can make decisions on where resources should be prioritized. And that if we can affect an immediate rescue or maybe throw some supplies to you and say, hey, we will be back. We will, but just take comfort in knowing that through this process here, this card that you're looking at, your incident is known. It is documented, it is pushed up, and help will be on the way. All right, we're quickly gonna kind of see a graphic of what this battalion operation looks like. So you've got a visual for what's happening at all the companies, and they're pushing all that information up to the first funnel point. So you can see that this person, these two people that are housed at this fire station, they break up into this team with dedicated assignments. You've got folks on the radio that are responsible for receiving that information, and then somebody takes it, scribes it at this level. We work and we train in an analog process. Digital is great as long as it's working. So very literally, we are prepared in the event everything goes down to continue operations. So we've got folks scribing with a pen and paper to put these cards together. That scribe then sends that information over to a map manager. Typically, this is a driver, somebody who's very intimate with the battalion, the roads, the neighborhoods, and they're pictorially marking this on a map where the incidents are located. So that just get picture worth 1,000 words, and that gives the battalion manager, battalion chief, a visual on where the heart of the damage may be in their battalion, and they can make decisions accordingly. So once that gets marked on the map, that information goes over to the FIT. FIT is an acronym, Field Incident Technician. That FIT is basically the right-hand person for that battalion chief, so that they can be making decisions. And this FIT is taking that and they're putting it on a board at the direction of the battalion chief and the experience that typically 15 to 20 year chief has. They're making some of those hard decisions, some of those first judgment calls of what is level 1, 2, and 3. What can we handle with the resources we have? within our own battalion. What are we going to need outside battalion resources to help, or what are we going to need bigger than our battalion, and so forth. So this is all an act of triage. And then all of this information gets pushed up to the EOC when they're called upon, and to make out, again, in the theme of triage, typically the top 5 incidents at this level are the ones that get pushed up, and then this cycle goes over and over and over. And so if you're incident number 6, that doesn't mean we won't get to you, but we're feeding the top incidents first, and then we'll come back for the what we consider the next 5 and the next 5 and the next 5. All right, so quickly, where does that information go at the RMC? Because we're continuing to just push this up and get greater situational awareness. Very similar process happens. This is a picture of inside our resource management center. This is staffed with command and staff leadership that are able to make area command decisions. They've got battalion maps of the entire city there, and they're doing a very similar process. So assigned positions, I basically just talked to you about what some of these individuals are doing. That RMC manager is the person that is coordinating with the EOC. You've got liaisons, you've got the scribes that are documenting, the map manager, same function. We have a fit in the RMC as well. And then that EOC liaison is the person that manages that relationship and making sure that this is clearly communicated to the EOC so that it can be integrated into the larger response and also give EOC and the mayor accurate information. All right. One quick slide just to show you, because I think it's important for you to know that all of this is done in a rhythm, and it's based on these communication cycles. The mayor gets a brief, and there are report outs at the EOC that all of the departments, Seattle Fire you're hearing about tonight, but all these other departments are doing similar activities, need to feed accurate and timely information up to you. So we are back planning all of our communication cycles in order to meet these timelines, so that the EOC is getting briefed on the at the accurate time. So that's with the busy picture, but if you took the time to look at it, you'll see how that breaks down to make that achievable. Okay, so we've talked about who we are. We've talked about what the some of our internal plans are. We've talked about the nuts and bolts of what we are doing once the ground stops shaking. And now I'd like to just shift into the beginning of our multiple alarm response and talk a little bit more about what do we do when Seattle Fire, as robust as we are, just isn't enough and we need help. So typical fire response would be a CINT with 4 engines, 2 trucks, and a complement of support staff. As the fire is larger in size and we need to put more units towards it, we will up it. And this breakdown right here shows you what that looks like. So 211, 311, 411, 511, and then a general fire alarm, and that's when we're throwing everything we have at it. And you can see how they incrementally grow there. And I want to just show this happens. This happens on a routine basis, not frequently, but I mean, it's not uncommon to see a 4-alarm fire in normal daily operations. So I want to set that expectation with you that there are times we don't have to wait for an earthquake for the Seattle Fire Department to be depleting our resources in order to manage incidents. And I'm going to give this as an example. This is a snapshot of a multiple alarm response. This was a 411 fire, a 4-alarm fire back in 2018. And as you can see, that ticker down there at the bottom shows you there's a lot of units assigned to this one single incident. This was not even an earthquake. So you can see all the committed SFD resources at that time. So it is not out, it's not far-fetched to this kind of puts in perspective that if we have a significant earthquake, terrorist event, or so forth, we are going to be leaning on this process we're about to talk about asking for outside resources. All right, so what do we do? What's that look like when we need help? So mentioned a minute ago, there's kind of rings or incremental responses to that. That local would be considered mutual or automatic aid. And we do this, we support others and others support us on a regular basis. We will send units across the border over into Shoreline, or folks may come down into Seattle. Now, I will tell you, we are fortunate. You are fortunate because your fire department has a lot of capabilities, and we are able to handle the majority of calls day in and day out, regardless of size or characteristic, internally. So this is something that we're planning for, and we're familiar with the process, but you don't see units from other departments in the city limits very frequently. That's not the same in other parts of the county, where they just don't have as many resources. They cross borders frequently, and do automatic aid in order to make sure that they have adequate responses. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen here. The photo you're looking at right there is the back of Seattle Fire Station 14. And this was just about a year ago, excuse me, during the Capitol Hill organized protest. And that's where we said, you know what, we may need more. And we made the calls and we staged some extra vehicles. So you can see other units came in to do that. So after that local level, which may or may not be available because they may be dealing with their own, we've got the regional level, and that's things like state mobilizations, emergency management compacts, and then even that next concentric circle out is at the national level. Now the implied deal here is though that the further out they're coming from, the longer it takes, and when time is not on our side in these type of responses. So again, this is the second time you'll hear me say it is critical. You are critical in being a part of making this a successful response, and being prepared, having a plan, and being able to take care of yourself and your neighbors and your communities. What I want to show you next is a quick video. The greater, what we call the Greater Seattle Urban Area Security Initiative, or the UASI region, and the UASI region is made up of Snohomish, Pierce, King counties, city of Bellevue, and the city of Seattle. And we've been preparing for this type of regional response for years. Really, since 2005, we've been running a program to train first responders with the skills that they need, the technical skills they need to perform those structural collapse rescues, those life-saving rescues. It's estimated that a magnitude 9.0 or something similar like that, or a terrorist event in the region is going to require upwards of 3,000 trained responders that have the technical training, the technical equipment to perform the level of life-saving rescues that we anticipate and that we've been talking about tonight. And it's through this program that we've been continually training and building that cadre throughout the region for this type of incident specifically. Right now, we've got roughly 700 people trained. So again, we're not there yet. We're working on it. But you can be a part of that effort by being prepared in your own communities. So this video not only shows what that training consists of, but it really emphasizes the need of communities to be self-sufficient to make this work. So it's 4 or 5 minutes. I want to show it to you, and then we'll proceed with the presentation.
Apologies, everybody. It looks like our audio is not working for this video. Andy, I don't know if you want to try to restart it, or maybe we'll just press forward if we're not able to get the audio working. Apologies again.
Yeah, let me try one more time, Carrie. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. That's what happens, you know.
Did you catch any of the audio?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
rats. Okay, we'll give it one more shot. If not, it's a great representation, and folks can contact me if they'd like to see it.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we will be sending out the presentation, I believe, so people can take a look at it. If you have it available, we can always do it that way as well.
Andy, you might need to unshare, and then when you reshare, there's a little box to select include audio.
Are you getting audio now or not?
No, no audio.
Okay, I'm gonna do one troubleshoot, but I want to respect people's time tonight, and we will drive on if we need to. So give me a second.
Enormous amount of risk out there. I think what I went through and looked historically,
You hear that?
it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. We're looking here at training our local firefighters regionally to be able to engage in that first 24 hours with the knowledge and the tools to be able to be successful.
There has been a massive explosion at a federal building in Oklahoma City.
The federal building has been blown off, Jesse.
About a third
God.
building.
Oh my God!
See at least 20 cars under the bridge. You don't even see the tires.
Multiple calls reporting a crane falling from the roof onto multiple cars.
Emergencies, emergencies. We are on the ground. We are.
Oh my God! Send every available ambulance, everything you got now.
We don't know whether this is the result of a bomb, or we're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
Continuing live coverage of the apparent terrorist attacks today here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. It's important to say these things at the very beginning. There is much that is not known about what is happening. The second thing is that the word from almost everybody who's trying to deal with the situation, the word of the day is steady. Steady.
This class is way more than a class. This isn't just a certificate. It's a capability. And in some ways, it's a capability that's not just specific to their jurisdiction. They can call on the jurisdictions that surround them and even further out to the regional partners to support this.
When we first started out, we really thought we kind of had it all figured out. And like anything else, the more you learn, the less you realize you know, the longer you do this. And you know, what we've evolved to today is light years ahead of where we were when we began.
The class in total is an 80-hour course, 30 of which are actually spent doing some pre-study material, and then 50 hours, which is 5 10-hour days, very long physical days, are spent doing the hands-on portion of the class.
We hit the ground moving pretty quickly, though, picking up some, lots of heavy loads, odd-shaped loads. We truly try to challenge them because we know they've lifted pieces of concrete up before. We know they've used airbags before. We try to really challenge them and show them unique ways to lift a piece of equipment or use equipment they've maybe never been exposed to before. Tuesday is all about shoring, emergency building shores. So Monday is pretty much cribbing heavy, but Tuesday they actually learn how to construct both prefab aluminum shoring and wood shoring that they can leave in place later. Wednesday is breaching, breaking, and burning day, where they'll be exposed to 3 different technologies for cutting steel: the petrogen, the oxyacetylene torch, and the exothermic torch. In addition to that, half the day is spent breaching and breaking concrete. the different ways to do clean and dirty breaches horizontally, vertically, up, down, in all ways. So they have a pretty good basis for both pneumatic, hydraulic, and manual tools for breaking concrete. Thursday is rigging day, and I think that's one of the classes that sets us apart from what you might get exposed at a heavy rescue class or rescue system 2 class. Is we're really heavy into the hand rigging and how to move loads inside a structure. So they have the cranes part of the day, but the majority of the day is spent building artificial high directionals, A-frames, gin poles, those kind of things, and then drifting those using lever hoists or come-alongs and grip hoists and those kinds of things, where they really can apply those skills if they don't have access to a crane. If they have access to these pieces of equipment that are available at any rental yard or any Home Depot or any hardware store, they're able to use those things. Because let's face facts, when the big one hits, whether it's man-made or a natural disaster, we're never going to have all the equipment that we want or we need. So we have to be pretty innovative in how we can solve problems before the cavalry gets here, which may be a week or more before we actually get all the resources that we need, and will people survive that long? So how can we maximize the efforts that we're going to be able to bring to bear early on?
Right. Okay. All right, we should be looking at the outside resources slide. The video we just showed, I think, have confidence that your responders, not only in the Seattle Fire Department, but throughout the region, are getting trained in the skills, the technical skills they need to come get you. So when we need more, this is what it looks like. There's a flow to it. There's a process in place. It starts at the on-scene, the incident commander there, and then we push those resource requests, very similar through the process we just talked about, up to our local RMC, who then feeds that to the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center at the city. And then they have tentacles to go out to what you can see, those different channels there to acquire that assistance. Some of these things, the Emergency Management Assistance Compact or the EMAC, that's going to provide assistance during governor-declared state emergencies or disasters. And these are systems that allow states to send personnel and equipment and commodities to assist with the response and the recovery efforts outside of their state. So others may be coming in. And then the PNEMA, it's the Pacific Northwest Emergency Management Agreement, very similar to the EMAC, but that's a specific membership. So here in the Northwest, that's Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Alaska, British Columbia, and the Yukon. So one thing just to note, I mentioned a minute earlier when we were talking about communications. I told you that some of our members have deployed to support wildland firefighting, and wildland firefighting does this really well. They've got processes in place to request additional resources and build up capabilities where they need them and do mobilizations. And so we have that channel as well as in the fire service through the Fire Service Resource Mobilization Plan. And really when it comes down to, that's really based on a lot of relationships and maintaining those and being able for the local fire chief, when they've depleted or are close to depleting their resources and their mutual aid efforts, to call and start that effort going as well. So that gives you an idea. In this process, things are categorized, and the opening slide showed you that I'm presenting on ESF 4, 9, and 10, firefighting, search and rescue, and hazmat. But all the other needs that go into response are also categorized, and that's where the EOC is beginning to put order to these different requests in order to fulfill them. And then I want to show this slide real quick. So this is the FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Network. There's 28 teams out there across the country, and up in Washington, we have one of those, Washington Task Force 1. And very similar to what I talked about a minute ago, if the earth's shaking here in the Northwest, we're not going to, Washington Task Force 1 isn't coming to help. It may not even be coming from California. Washington Task Force 1 has responded all the way down to Georgia before, but with that takes time. And there's a very detailed method for mobilizations that you don't need to be worried about, but it calls upon assets that are outside of the area of needing the most need, and then whether they fly or they drive is really going to take time, and that's why it's imperative that you all are prepared to conduct your own rescues or just impact the rescue. I've seen statistics that show that the most rescues and life-saving efforts are really going to be by those that are nearby. That's you, your neighbor, that have a long bar, a shovel, a set of work gloves that can just leverage something and grab somebody. Because the longer it goes, science shows the longer your body goes with potential medical injuries and lack of water and food, the less the chances of survival end up being. So these teams are coming with a lot of technically trained individuals and a lot of excellent equipment, but it just takes time. So this is where we're gonna land, and is in that area of public preparedness. So I know that the last month's webinar spoke to some of this, but really it comes down to taking ownership and being ready for yourself, for your neighborhood, for your community, being self-sufficient. So, and there are lots of resources that the City of Seattle and the EOC has to help guide you through this process. And so Seattle Fire Department highly encourages you to do that. Anticipate what you're going to need and prepare that ahead of time. Some of the trainings that are offered here in the city that we would encourage you to take are listed there. Get yourself first aid trained, get your neighbor first aid trained, go take a CPR class. The Stop the Bleed class gives you the skills and the equipment to do that. And then one program that we hope to pick back up post-COVID is the basic search and rescue training to give you some of the fundamentals that you can do to save people's lives. But this really comes down to managing those expectations. Like I've said a few times now, we will not be there as quickly as we are in a day-to-day response. And then many of you are familiar with this website. Up there in the upper right corner is where you can find this information. But I would really point you towards the EOC. Amazing, just one location for so many resources, and familiarize yourself. I would imagine that most of you on this call or on this webinar tonight are familiar with the hub system. Get involved, help other people start a hub. We're showing that there's over 135 right now here in the city, so that's outstanding. But embrace that, own it, build it up, so that when the time comes, you're ready. Seattle Fire Department also embraces the hub concept. Folks like Cindy Barker over in West Seattle, we talk and are integrating our plans together. Last year we included them, the hubs and the ACN, the communications folks, into our earthquake plan, because we know we will not be alone and we need you to be a part of this response. With that, we've talked about these things. This is where we started, and this is where I'd like to end before we go into questions. But you know a little bit more about us now. You know what our plans are. You know what our initial actions are as soon as the ground stops shaking. We talked about what that looks like to request help when we are not enough, and then we've provided you with some suggestions on how you can equip yourself and your community to be ready. This webinar tonight is going to be followed by another one in July. You can see the schedule there. Really encourage you to continue to tune into these. It's a great effort that the EOC is doing to take this and take ownership in this as a city in preparing for an earthquake, a large disaster, and so forth. So with that, I would love to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you for all of you for listening in. I think we'll start in on some of the Q&A questions that we have. Neil would like to thank you so much for your presentation and everything that SFD does every day. His question was relating to how much energy do you store away to keep going? For example, fuel, food, and water for operations. Second part is do the fire stations have backup power generators, food, and potable water?
Neil, that's a great question, because we need to practice what we preach, right? So the fire departments do have generators. Each station does have a generator, and when that is on a routine check to make sure that's operational, and it's getting most stations have a fuel source there. The exact gallonage of the tank, I don't know off the top of my head. I can get that information for you, but it's large. I mean, upwards of I don't think I'm exaggerating if I was to say 1,000 gallons or more. And so we do keep the fuel on hand in order to both fuel our rigs manually if needed with a hand pump, or use that to fuel the generator to keep the station going. Your questions about food and water in the stations, we do have every 6 months to make it easy for us. We do it at daylight savings time. We change out the water that we have stored in the fire station so that we have fresh water that we know that we're able to use. And the food, there are some, it's not uniform, but there are some rations in stations. Now, we do as a department have cases of MREs, the meals ready to eat, that are able to be pushed out in the event of emergency, but we don't always keep them at each station. So that is an area that we're continuing to assess. We try to keep them in centrally located regions, like in dedicated stations that could then serve as a cache to push them out into their battalions. But hopefully, Neil, that answers the majority of your questions.
Great, thank you, Captain Collins. The second one is, and I'm not sure if you have the specific answer, but good question. What percentage of firefighters live within the city of Seattle boundaries? And then the second part of that question is, what will happen if highways are out and those firefighters cannot get to work?
Right, that's a great question, because we've got all kinds of fancy equipment and tools, but if we don't have the people, that's our primary asset. It is no surprise the firefighters don't all live here in Seattle. Many of them live outside the city. Some of them even live outside the state, and the unique schedule that we keep, the 24-hour schedule, allows for that. It is known, though, in our Orange Book and in our callback plans, individuals are designated by distance that they live away from the city. And so that's a quick reference for the folks that are doing the callbacks. We know that we've got a quarter of our department, a captive audience, on duty at any given moment. So we've got them in hand. But if we're looking to bring the next shift in or so forth, they can do that analysis based on who's, I'll call it a tier 1, 2, and 3 based on just distance away from the city, and call upon those closest first if transportation is an issue. Now, the one thing I would add to that, though, is that in the spirit of creativity, firefighters, I wouldn't be surprised if they find their way in one way or another. And so that's not necessarily a plan that we can bank on, but I wouldn't be surprised. But firefighters are members of communities as well. Some of them live in Seattle, some of them don't. And if someone lives in Tacoma and they've had an earthquake down there, just as we are asking you all as a community to be involved and be part of that response effort there, those firefighters that may be geographically trapped somewhere else and live in a community somewhere else are going to be a part of that greater response in the region, just may not be in Seattle. And the converse of that is true as well. There are people that live in Seattle that work for other fire departments that may, we're thinking outside the box here, but they may become part of our response because they've got the skills and the knowledge to affect the mitigating the situation.
Great, thank you, Captain Collins. Another one from Neil. For a level 1 disaster, when you are not able to ask for resources, i.e. pulling, what gets automatically pushed to you in the big one? What is SFD's push list?
Okay, I think I understand, Neil, what you're asking. In the slides, those terms pull and pushed were used. Just for clarification, that was used in the passing of information. Radio traffic can get really, really busy and convoluted, and we talked about how all of this needs to be built into this communications flow and this strictly time cycle to make sure that adequate information is flowing up to the EOC in time. So instead of what we call stations pushing information, short of emergency traffic, firefighters injured or something of that nature, we allow the higher level, the battalion, to pull information from those units. That way they maintain positive control of the information flow and so forth. And so it's pulled from the companies to the battalion. The RMC pulls information from the battalions to the RMC. But your question is still relevant as far as equipment and what kind of the default packages are. We default to the boundaries of the battalions, and so any given battalion is likely to have 5 to 8, maybe 10 fire stations within their own battalion. So that at any given moment, if a battalion chief would have 5 to 8 or so apparatus at their disposal or at their ability to resource, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the complement, the baseline complement they could expect to have out of the gate. We haven't necessarily developed push packages like, okay, just push the button and launch, help. But within Web EOC and within the EOC, that thought process is there. We know that one USAR team from FEMA is not going to be enough. I mean, you look at the World Trade Center, that's one building that had 7, 8, 9, 10 USAR teams dedicated to one building. So, I mean, if we open the aperture up and say, well, the whole downtown city of Seattle now looks like the World Trade Center, I mean, that's going to take all of them. So we try to front load that administratively, but nothing is on a short fuse just to call.
Great, thank you. Andy, there was a question about being able to find and read the Orange Book. Is this accessible to the public?
It's a document that's designed for internal use. It is on every fire engine, every administrative car or vehicle that the fire department has been issued one. So they are at the ready for our members, regardless of whether they're out of the station, in the station, or not. But it's these plans. The Orange Book itself isn't necessarily a outward-facing document, but the plans that we just went over are nested in the EOC's plans for the fire department and for the city as a whole, and I believe those are made public. So I would venture that a lot of the material would be in those plans. It just may not be bound and say Orange Book on the front. Sure, and we will be sending information out after this webinar next week, including links to our sites with all of our public-facing plans. Thanks so much. Another specific question for you, Captain Collins, is if the fire station doors are stuck shut after an earthquake, how do the firefighters get out to get the fire trucks out? Good question, right? Because like I said, we've got to get out. We need to be out of the station. How do I say this? Firefighters are persistent, and they are going to find a way. I guarantee whether they unscrew every bolt on that door and take it off piece by piece manually, the door is not going to stop us from getting out of the station. Short of driving through the door, last resort, I can promise you that we will we will get out of the station if it's at all possible. Hopefully that gives you high level of confidence.
Great, thank you. Another question is, if we need something after an earthquake, can we walk up into our local fire station and get help? They also followed by first aid, water, food, and shelter. And I would add that this question can be answered by future webinars, but specifically to, let's say, first aid or communication, Captain Collins.
Yeah, Carrie, that's exactly right. I kind of let you peek behind the curtain to see what we are going to be doing, what your local firefighters are going to be doing after the ground shakes, and they are going to be immersed in that process of assessing the situation. You should be prepared that there may not be anybody at your fire station to even let you in if you come to the firehouse. That's not because we don't want to help, but it's because our direction at this point in the operation is to get out and to see. Now once we return, and I'll be honest, members on duty during this time should be prepared to not return. I mean, they very well could be operating off of that fire engine for another 24 hours. And so before they depart the station, when we move in, I didn't mention this in the presentation, but when we move into level 3, part of that response is putting extra equipment on the fire apparatus. I won't technical, but we put hard suction on the apparatus so that we can pull water from a swimming pool. We can pull water from a lake and so forth. We put extra batteries on the fire engine. We put extra clothes. We put extra water. We put it on the fire rig because when we leave, we're not expecting to come back. There's going to be plenty of work for us to not return to the fire station. So, so with that, I would say always, I never want to send the message that the fire department doesn't want you to either call 911 or come knock on the door if you're experiencing an emergency. But I just need to manage expectations that your emergency may or may not be fielded in the same way as it would on a level 1 day-to-day operations. So I really would ask that you use a level of discretion and self-sufficiency to try to take care of your needs through prior planning, through community resources, within your neighborhood and so forth, before you go to the fire department.
Great, thank you so much. So I think we'll have one final question. Can civilians bring and donate supplies to fire stations? And I know this was a hot topic during the intensity of the pandemic. Can you answer that?
Yeah, if I read this right, it's from Neil. Neil, thank you for being so engaged tonight. We are not out of the throes of COVID yet, and if you've recently visited your local station, it probably still says that we're not doing blood pressure checks. We're not as open to the community as we would like to be right now. Will we return to that? Yeah, I believe so. Yes. Regarding the donation of supplies and so forth, it's gonna depend, and I'm not punting your question, but there is a level of interoperability that we need to maintain, and so some supplies need to be of a it's not because we don't want the assistance or it's not a kind gesture, but some things have to be of a certain material or a certain grade and so forth to be for the fire department to allow it. So I would say this. If you want, or if you feel like that's something you want to explore, once we get through COVID, the doors open up again, stop by and just have a conversation with the crew that's on duty. Let them know what you have, and they'll be able to give you an honest answer on whether or not the fire department is the best place for that, or maybe that's something that your local hub would benefit from, or another community group, so that overall, you're benefiting the regional response. It may not land at the fire station.
Great. So it looks like that is the end of our questions and the Q&A. I want to thank you so much, Captain Annie Collins, and all of you that attended tonight. We will get back to you. Those that provided an email will get a link to our recorded video on our YouTube page, as well as any other information we can provide either from Seattle Fire Department or from Emergency Management directly. And if there are questions that we weren't able to answer tonight, we will get back to you within a week or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and remember to join us for future webinars for other departments sharing how they respond to disasters. Be safe and take care.
Thank you.